Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. We're here to give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help come true here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We are so grateful that you have joined us on this day and every day. We're here 9 times a week, believe it or not, folks. 9 different programs and topics. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. I know I get that going by pretty quick, but I want to get to our guest as well. And Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. This particular program that you are going to be listening to, you'll be able to hear it twice, both today as well as on the 20th, Friday the 20th of September. We'll tell you why in just a few moments. Our special guest here on the program today is Tezikiah Gabriel. She is the executive director for Pathways to Peace, and we wanted to have her on the program specifically because of a very special day that is coming up. Pathways to Peace, I should say. It's a UN peace messenger organization in consultation with the ECOSOC. We'll find out about that acronym as well. And Tez works to basically, in partnership, I should say, with Peacebuilders locally and globally to build a culture of peace. And I want to welcome you, Tezikiah, to our program today. It's really a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Richard. Thank you so much.
First place I'm going to go is that name of yours. Beautiful name. What is its origin? What does it mean? And is it your given name?
It was given to me, but when I was older, it's a spirit name, and it's Aramaic, and it's wisdom and truth.
Beautiful, beautiful.
It's a big charge.
Now, did you also choose in your adult years Gabrielle as well?
No, actually, Gabriel was my mother's maiden name. So I took that when I was older, but I grew up loving that name, of course, because of the symbolism with angels.
Absolutely. So, I have two nieces, one Gabrielle and one Danielle. And for a long time, I believe it was Gabrielle who got really ticked at me because I always flipped the names. I would call her Danielle and her sister Gabrielle. And the way they got me to remember it, and of course I apologize to her for my faux pas, but they got me to remember it because she's not the talkative one, but she goes by the nickname Gabby. So that helped. That helped. I know there's a special name for it, but a little anchor for me so that Uncle Richard can get it right with his nieces. We have talked ad infinitum. And by the way, the anniversary of this program is coming up on the 7th of September. 17 years we've been doing this. 17 years we've been promoting a new paradigm for a new world, giving people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true, looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. Just look around us. I'm talking more and more and more with people who are basically, they don't know exactly how to go about doing this and how to fix it. But what they are is they are fed up with our electoral system, our election process, the selecting of leaders. Some of them want to be rulers, leaders at all of the different levels. It's just exhausting. You'd think that it was happening every year, and that's how it feels sometimes. And yet the people who are running for these different offices, maybe when they run for the very first time, they're very idealistic. They're very concerned about their families, their communities, their city, state, or nation. And they get into it feeling like I can make a difference. I'm going to make a difference. And unfortunately, they get caught up in the cogs. And they lose their focus, their direction for a myriad of different reasons. One woman who from what I remember her telling me 17 years ago on this program, Barbara Marks Hubbard, the late Barbara Marks
Yes.
Hubbard.
Yes, of course.
She, if I'm correct, was she not on a ticket as vice president? And she was actually going to, if the ticket had been elected, would actually open up a Department of Peace. We already had the
Yes.
Department of War, the Defense
Yes.
Department.
Yes.
What what happened to that idea
Hmm. Well,
in the reality of things? Now here we are, like I said, 17 years later since I spoke with her. From where you sit.
yes. Well, here's the good news, Richard. There actually is still an initiative to create a Department of Peace building. And it has been our founder, Avon Madison, worked with Barbara Marks Hubbard, and I've known Barbara too in her later years. But they were a part of that initial organizing that has now become the Department of Peace Building Initiative. And it looks as though they're going to have the most signers isn't the correct term, sponsors
Mhm.
of the bill that they've ever had by fall, which would be 100. And so there's more hope for the passage of that department today than there has been for years. So that's the good news.
Okay. And when we're talking about 100 signers, we're talking about members of the legislative body of the
Yes.
nation.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you that it used to be that the bottom of the list of those people who were not really fond of by the public used to be car salesmen,
Ah,
used to be, and sometimes insurance salesmen. But
yes.
from what I understand, just the feeling that I get right now, our legislators are at the bottom. Their approval rating is negative something. Because
Yes.
people are just disgusted for a lot of reasons, whether it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum politically.
Yes.
People are just fed up. And as much good work as some of these long timers may have done,
Mhm.
I don't think the founding fathers ever intended it to be a lifelong job.
No,
And
yes. And I
yeah,
think what you're talking about, I agree with you, Richard, is really that there's a lack of trust. The studies even tell us that we no longer trust our elected officials or those who are in leadership positions um, to act on our behalf. And I think you're absolutely right that that's pervasive currently. And I think that what the reason for that is manyfold. I think there's so much misinformation out there that people don't know what to trust.
mm,
I think that they see that at times that their political leaders aren't acting on on behalf of them on things that they really care about. Um, and I believe that they also witness that not a lot is moving forward, that there's a stalemate as partisan leaders, you know, strategize to block legislation versus coming forward to advance it. And of course, if there's three factors, there's probably 6 or 10 or 12. But
yeah.
certainly, I agree with you that that is a prevailing um, concept right now with the American people. And also because we work globally, we're seeing that around the world as well.
Let's talk about the UN International Day of Prayer, the 21st of September of every year. Give us the history of it and what happens on that day.
Oh, goodness. Um, So the International Day of Peace was established in 1981, and it was unanimously supported at the United Nations, which is rare. And so what was being said about what moved the body to adopt the International Day of Peace was that that it was time to lay down weapons and observe ceasefires. And so the Constitution of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is UNESCO, which provided leadership around those efforts within the UN, has a great quote, and it is that wars begin in the minds of men. So it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. And so the ideas of peace, the culture of peace, the need for peace to be cultivated in the minds of children, people, communities, through both formal and informal education and across countries and generations. So Pathways to Peace, my organization, and our founder, Avon Madison, was instrumental in working with the United Nations and organizing civil society to get the passage of that International Day of Peace. And I know, Richard, that you're interested in the story about the PeaceWave as well, right?
Yes, oh,
Which
absolutely.
it's a perfect, which is a perfect tie-in to talking about the International Day of Peace. So again, Avon kind of organized civil society, worked with Ambassador John McDonald. She worked with the Assistant Attorney General of the United Nations, who was Robert Mueller at the time, to get the passage of the International Day of Peace. So as I said, it was adopted in 1981. And so it was a monumental event. And it was anticipated that there would be global celebrations every year for the International Day of Peace into perpetuity. But at the time, in 1982, the only observation of the International Day of Peace was a moment of silence at the opening of the General Assembly of the UN. So this was very disappointing for those civil society leaders who had worked so hard for that passage. And so in 1983, Pathways to Peace embarked on a year-long process that culminated in the first United Nations International Day of Peace celebration in San Francisco. And San Francisco, of course, was the birthplace of the United Nations, but also home to Pathways to Peace. So that very first celebration of the International Day of Peace in San Francisco took place. 40 countries were involved in that planning. And that day, dignitaries were in attendance. There was singing, dancing, proclamations, speakers, and the PeaceWave was introduced in that gathering. And so the PeaceWave, very simply, is a minute of silence and a moment of peace that is to be practiced at noon in every time zone around the world, creating that wave around the world. So right there in the middle of the City Hall Plaza in San Francisco 40 years ago, everything stopped at noon for that PeaceWave. And we do mean everything stopped. The cash registers stopped, ringing. Radio stations stopped for that minute. Programming for the local NBC affiliate station, KRON, paused programming for that moment of silence. Telephone operators stopped. So in San Francisco, and with those countries around the world that were involved 40 years ago, everything stopped for that pause for peace. And so that was a monumental kind of event. Of course, in the newspapers that went out around the world, that there was that pause for peace, that peace wave. And so what started with just this handful of people that had connected to the globe before internet. So you can imagine all this organizing was by letter, fax, phone calls. But who showed up on the City Hall Plaza was really a handful of people to commemorate that historic International Day of Peace resolution. And that handful of people created that wave that has now become a movement. And now around the world, there are about 3 billion people engaged with Peace Day, the International Day of Peace, every year on September 21st, as you said. And about 1 million of those people are practicing that peace wave, that minute of silence, moment of peace at 12 noon in their time zone. A minute to pause, to really be able to have a vision of peace, to be able to feel peace in one's heart, to be able to know peace. And so that's the Peace Day. So that simple practice, the Peace Wave, really makes a difference today in our individual and collective ability to embrace and embody peace in our daily lives. So that celebration of the International Day of Peace with the Peace Day was 40 years ago. And we think that's worth celebrating, right? So we're going back to that very same place, now the Civic Center Plaza, on Peace Day, September 21st. It's coming up really quickly for another major global celebration that we know will launch the next evolution of that peace building movement, so that we can finally and completely turn that dial, Richard, and experience peace on earth. So
nice.
that's the International Day of Peace story blended with the Peace Wave, and of course, our upcoming incredible global celebration.
You have a lot of incredible people. A couple things I want to mention too before we get into that lineup. Number one, shows you what I know. I did not know. I know where the UN resides. It's in New York. I did not know that it started in San Francisco. So
yes.
Wonderful. My hat's off to our educational system once again. Thank you very much. Second thing is,
Richard,
yes,
I have to tell you that if you visit San Francisco, and you probably have already,
no,
if you do, you'll have to go to Muir Woods. There is a plaque in Muir Woods. It's also a beautiful national park. There's a plaque there for a later gathering of the United Nations that took place in a wooded part of the park. And so, yes, the founders of the United Nations, regardless of how many people feel about the United Nations today, really had the best interest of all peoples in their hearts and minds as they gathered to create the UN.
Mm. The other part is I've been in this business, the broadcast business, for 45 years. Not one of the radio stations that I have worked for over that period of time ever on any other day, let alone the 21st of September, paused for 60 seconds to do anything. I mean, we've had the emergency broadcast and now the emergency alert system that we run regularly once a week and once a month for the monthly test and so on and so forth. I'm just wondering if that is still happening today with radio and television participating in this fashion.
Yes, well, we're trying to make that happen. It isn't quite as easy as it, and it wasn't easy back 40 years ago either, but we're working on that to see if we can make that happen. Of course, we're living in, as you know, a very complex world with all kinds of variables to kind of, and some of those become some hurdles we have to jump that we haven't yet jumped to make that happen. But I love that you mentioned it, and I'd love it if you could help us do that, or perhaps find a way to do that on this show. That would be perfect.
Well, the interesting irony is that of all of the 9 programs that are heard on this station, and of course the podcasts on SoundCloud and iTunes and the videocast on YouTube, my program, that's the one day I used to be on years ago. I'm not on today, but I'll see what I can do. Okay.
Oh, that would be amazing. And even if you can't have it on your program, perhaps you're one of those change makers that can be an influence for others. Who knows? We never know where these conversations are going to go. We just know that they change everything.
I have an idea that I'll share with you when we're finished with this program, with this conversation. And we'll see where we can go with that. We're talking with a very special guest here on the program today, Tezikiah Gabriel, Executive Director for Pathways to Peace. We certainly hope that you will go to pathways-to-peace.org/international-day-of-peace-40th. That's 40th -anniversary. However, I will make that the link when we post the podcast and videocast. That's the link that we'll have up there for you folks to click on and go there. And you can register if you can't get to San Francisco. Okay, we obviously know there are ways that we can participate remotely. So we encourage you to go register at the website pathways-to-peace.org is the website, and of course they have all the commensurate links that you can find out. This is also on Instagram, Pathways to Peace, as well as Facebook, also Pathways to Peace. So we encourage you to participate in whatever fashion you choose to here in the United States. And obviously, it's global. I mean, we are global when we post the podcast. So if you're listening to us, we'd love for you to participate in that regard. So I am also curious over the past, and if my math is correct, am I correct? The resolution was passed in 1982, correct?
81.
But the first Pathway to Peace, or PeaceWave, that was not in 81, correct? That was in
84. That's
84.
Our 40th.
Right.
And the first International Day of Peace celebration in San Francisco was in 1984. That's why we're so excited about going back there.
Absolutely.
And hosting this event. It's our 40th anniversary.
Well,
go ahead.
Some might ask the question, and again, I am very happy that we're participating in this respect with this anniversary, this monumental 40th anniversary. However, The question I have is it a misnomer that we are not in a greater state of peace globally, or is it because, or it is the appearance that we are not because of the global connectedness that we experience, and that so these different little things that pop up on social media make it appear as though the whole earth is on fire, so to speak. Is it a matter of perception, and yet the reality is there have been some major strides forward?
Yes. So I think in terms of is it this or is it that, it's both, Richard.
Okay.
So we do know that there is more conflict around the world, more violent conflict around the world now than I think there was since like 1942. So there is a lot of violent conflict around the world, no question. Yes, we are far more aware of it because of our access to information. And so we're far more aware of it. What we don't see so much, and Richard, you probably do see this, certainly I'm surrounded by it, is that there is a mass of people of peace, make peace builders,
Mhm.
that are surfacing, and it really is a growing movement of people who know peace, they are peace, and they're building peace on our planet. And this planetary movement is significant. It's significant, and it's a movement of consciousness because, of course, we know I ask myself every day, how can we turn this dial, and
Mhm.
really embody and then peace on earth in a way that really brings wars to an end, that deals with conflicts with dialogue and peaceful resolution. How can we do that? And it's, as you know, there are a lot of factors that contribute to the culture of war while we're trying to build a culture of peace.
Mm.
But there is a huge growing mass of people who know that that minds are shifting, that more people are embracing peace, and so it doesn't hurt that the science has now merged with spirituality and indigenous wisdom to verify that we are all connected, that we have never been disconnected from one another.
Yeah.
And that interconnectedness is, if we really can embrace that we are all one, then how can I harm you when I know it harms me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that is a vastly growing movement. I do believe, Richard, and you probably do too, that in all of the hearts of human beings, there is a hunger for peace. Even those world leaders that seem to be so invested in war, I believe in the hearts there's a yearning for peace. So I believe that that's the peace that we need to nurture in our field of consciousness. We
Mhm.
need to be conscious of our thoughts. We need to be conscious of our nurturing our inner peace, because it all starts there.
Mhm.
Peace is an inside job. So if we can be intentional with our minds, and if we can be intentional with our actions, that inner peace that we hold within our hearts emanates out into our relationships, in our daily lives, in our interactions with others. And that's how we feed that field so that peace can surface in form on our planet.
Yeah. Tezikiah Gabriel, my guest, executive director for Pathways to Peace, and pathwaystopeace.org is the website. We encourage you to go there. You know, one of the things that I find fascinating, you talk about obviously being the peace that we want to see. And I think that was Gandhi who said that,
Yes.
you know, be the peace you want to see in the world. I'm not a fan of drama. I've had situations in my life where the drama starts and I walk away, and then I'm accused of running away. You don't want to face that, whatever it is. No, I don't want to deal with the drama, you know, up to here. And I worked for 15 years in the 80s and early 90s during the height of the televangelism craze, I'll call it, for a Christian radio station. And I would hear this same message over and over and over and over again about the end of the world. All of the prophecies, the book of Revelation, Daniel, the list goes on. And at one point, I was basically kind of talking to some people, and I said, you know, is there any way that I can help to kind of speed this process along a little bit? Is there something that I will become the Antichrist, okay, to bring about all of this stuff, to bring it to an end so we can move on to a new story? Because you want to know something? I am bored to sleep with this story. You've been telling this same story for 2,000 years. And, you know, and of course, when I use this phrase, I do not mean any disrespect. Some people say, well, you are already showing disrespect. No, I'm trying to explain that there are those of us on this planet right now who are, you know, it's like I can only read a certain book so many times before I've got it. The great book, I call it a great book, the great book, Stranger in a Strange Land. The word, there's one word I take away from that entire book, and I love it. It's grok, to grok. And I define it based upon the definition I've seen, and the example in the book is to assimilate into every subatomic particle of your being in terms of understanding. And that, I think, is where we're struggling. But at the same time, it seems as though, Tez, that there is, and I don't know of any other word to use, there is an evolutionary process that is happening, okay, whether we like it or not. No matter what we do, no matter what this leader does in terms of passing this law and that law and banning this and restricting rights to that and so forth, it's like you are fighting. Okay, let me put it this way. Salmon can swim upstream to spawn, not you, when it comes to evolution. Would you say that that is a fair assessment, that these people who are fighting, whether it's the PeaceWave, whether it's peace in our time, et cetera, ending conflicts and trying to continue to keep the war machine, the military industrial complex going on and on and on, their days are numbered because the evolutionary process is not something that even you and I control, but you and I are. I use the analogy of a river, and I'm just laying back. I've never been able to float on my back, but in this case, I'm going to learn. And we allow the current of evolution to carry us. And there are those who are fighting that current. And unfortunately, you're going whether you like it or not. Do you kind of see that? And I'm not trying to take away people's free will, but
No,
talk
no,
to us.
I understand what you mean. I would say, however, that the science, whether it's quantum physics, cosmology, the heart science by heart math, is
Yes.
saying that we, in fact, do shape, we totally shape and create our own reality. And it is about the choices we make. So when I talked a little bit earlier in passing, because I wasn't sure where we were going to go with this, Richard, I said that we need to be aware that we are feeding the field of consciousness. We do that through our thoughts, and we do that through our actions. And so this is not woo-woo stuff. This is science today. And so I think that what's important is that we aren't victims, that we have tremendous power. And our power is really about the choices we make. We can choose to allow the river to just take us, or we can choose to do what we need to do to change that current so that more of us can be able to swim upstream gracefully and easily. And so that's, I mean, there's so much more we could talk about that because it's such an interesting field of study. But we do know that there is no separation, that we do shape, inform, and create our own environment and circumstances. And we do that through our minds and through our heart and the actions we take. So I feel like I personally am so thrilled to be on the planet at this particular time because, again, I can see what's taking place just beneath that surface that is going to create that critical mass change, that 100th monkey, that tipping point where we will be experiencing more peace and eventually peace on Earth. So that's how I would respond.
And having mentioned Barbara Marx Hubbard earlier, she told me in that first interview, and I think I had her on 2 or 3 times after that, but she shared the analogy of what we are going through. And this is now going back to 2007. Okay.
Yes,
And
it's
that
been a long time.
it has been that we are going through, and she uses the metaphor, if you will, or analogy of we're going through the birth pangs.
That's right.
And it's like the metaphorical woman in this case, boy, she's got to want to give birth anytime soon, please. You know, I mean, it's unreal. But by the same token, it took me a while to accept this concept that it is the challenges that in our lives that generate a character, so they say. And early on, I used to think there's got to be an easier way to build character. Come on. I mean, do we really have to go down that road?
On anyone. We wouldn't want to wish character building like that on anyone.
It's interesting.
But,
of course, again,
but in universal time, 2007 was a blip on the radar screen. And so, you know, we're still in that birthing process and we're creating that new Earth. I know that. And I see it in terms of again, what's happening with so many around our world. I'm very privileged to participate with a lot of those individuals who know that that's what we're doing, and they're actively feeding that field for that creation to occur.
Well, again, the process, you know, you kind of put it in a real appropriate form, in that I talk about my existence, our existence as individuals, and I certainly do agree about the connectedness that, you know, we are. But we're here for, as I use the term, we're here for less than a puff of smoke. Okay, that's our existence.
That's
right. So the question is, in that puff of smoke, what are we going to do? Now, the question raises even more questions as to, okay, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I don't even know what I'm doing here. And so that's a big part of the equation that a lot of people have never never asked themselves, let alone pondered. And it's obvious, pardon me, it's obvious that they haven't even considered it, because we see them going about their day-to-day lives, getting up in the morning, going to work, coming home, having a few beers, watching the game, going to sleep, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, I guess is the term. And they just don't really see there. And they talk about, wanting the American dream and wanting to get ahead, and on and on and on. I mean, who doesn't? But they they see things very pessimistically, and and again, they're inundated from those sources that would show them all of the negative. I remember going through programs in the 80s and early 90s where we shifted out of victimhood into we took these phases into codependency and then into interdependency. And then in 2015, I'm going, no, 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 I'm not playing the game of victimhood again. You go away. You go away. We're closed. No more food for you. Go home. I'm going, what? And then, of course, so many people bought into the victimhood. And
Yes.
I would tell people,
Yes.
we are where we are because of what we have done, not because of what whoever they is.
That's right.
And so it seems to me that is another one of those elements that we need to A, address, and B, begin to say, honestly, even if you still feel and your thoughts are still victimhood thoughts, I am not a victim. One of my guests, I was sharing with the concept, I'm sure you've heard this, about all of the choices that we have made in the past have brought us right where we are today. And I
That's
even go this
exactly.
far, put it this way, Taz, that the choices that I made even as a child have brought me right here talking with you, and vice versa.
That's right.
Then I add, and all of the choices that we make from this point forward will propel us into the future that we will experience. And my guest said, well, to that last part, let me add that all of the choices that you make from this point forward are based upon your perception of what you think and believe the future will be.
Hmm.
And I thought I had never put that piece together before. And so, if you want to live in victimhood, then all of your choices today and tomorrow will be based upon being the victim. And
And
basically, what that tells me is that you have no free will. Your victimhood is, I mean, I guess that's the best way to put it. If you're
yes,
in victimhood, you've given up your free will to victimhood.
yes, yes. And and I would add that last piece, if that's where you're at today is in victimhood and you're comfortable with that, then that's what you'll create for your future
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah.
And so yes, I think that one of the most empowering things that any single person can do is to recognize and then embody choice, that they have a choice
Mm-hmm.
around basically everything. They have a
Everything.
choice about what they think. They have a choice about what they do with what they think. They have a choice with how they behave, how they interact with others.
Mhm.
And so I think, or I feel that perhaps, at least I'm also a minister. So you'll have to forgive. I do a little minister healing work on the side, that it can
Mhm.
be really scary for people to recognize that they have choice, because then they're just, then they have to take responsibility for that, the choices
No.
they make. And so, right. And so it's kind of scary. But what I want everyone to know is that you will never fully live a life that you'd love to live if you don't take control of your choices.
Mm.
And I always say, I choose peace. And people will say, well, there's a lot of work in creating peace. And I say, but the task is its own reward.
Yeah.
Because living a life of peace is the most incredible life you could live.
Yeah.
And so I think we all just need to step up and not be afraid, because, I believe, and this is not a new concept, most of our historic spiritual leaders, and currently indigenous and otherwise, have said that there's only two things, love or fear. So which one are you going to choose?
Yeah.
And if you're choosing victimhood, it's because underneath that is fear.
Mm-hmm.
If you're choosing love, then underneath that is power, that you know that you have power. I'm not talking about power over. I'm talking about the power that comes, the personal power, with recognizing that you have a choice to live your life in a way that you choose to live your life.
Absolutely. There are two books that I would recommend to people. One is a book that I recorded probably some 40 years ago for my first wife, who was totally blind. And the book was called Love is Letting Go of Fear by Gerald Jampolsky. The other book, which is being released this week, is called Choices, 5 Steps for Life. And that is my book, ladies and gentlemen. Reverend Dr. D is releasing his book this week called Choices, and it'll be available through Amazon, and we'll give out all the good information in due time. But one of the first things that is spoken of is make a choice. Well, yeah, there's a problem there because a lot of people don't even know what choices they have. So now you got to get educated. But I went to school. We're not talking about that kind of education. We're talking about observing your thoughts, taking a look at your current beliefs and where you are. And are you happy where you are? I mean, I'm happy where I'm at, but I still want more. Now, I don't want more in the sense that I want a 500 room mansion and 600 bathrooms and a jet plane and a boat and all of those. No, I want to keep it simple. Plus the fact that I want more so that I can, just as others helped me over not just the 45 years that I've been doing this, because I'm beholden to thousands of people, but so I can help others who are in need. When I first started driving, I didn't start driving until I was 38. Okay. I made the commitment that if somebody needed a ride and I was able to do so, I'd be giving them a ride. So that's kind of where I come from in that respect. So get educated, find out what choices you have. Don't spend a lot of time on that, but spend some time, especially if you feel like you really want to make a change. You've realized, I don't like where I'm at. I'm not happy. Talk to us about that. Now, there's a difference between peace and happiness. Talk to us about not just the difference, but how you perceive attaining some level of happiness in our lives.
Yeah. For me, there's also a difference between happiness and joy. So
Okay.
what comes for me with peace is joy. It's an internal kind of just being joyous in the world, being able to serve. I heard, Richard, in what you said about driving, that I always say I was dedicated to service in the womb. I think you probably were too. That's why we're here on the show. And so I get incredible joy from serving. So my work is very joyful for me. Does it get hard sometimes? Of course, everything does, but it doesn't shake my knowing that this is who I am. I am peace. I am joy. Happiness, I think, for a lot of people is more of an external experience. I can be happy too. Like I love going to the theme park and riding on the rides, and that makes me very happy. And it makes me a little joyful too, but it's different than the kind of peace and joy that I experience. And happiness for me is maybe more, it's just my definition, maybe more transient. It's because it's based on this or this or this, where the peace and joy that I feel is really stable. It is there to stay. It's right there in my heart. It's what I live from. And it doesn't matter much what is happening around me. I'm still going to have peace. And so I think about, the stories historically of people like Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps and still being at peace. And so that inner peace and then the joy that comes with it, especially for me in service, it just is unshakable, regardless of what's happening. So that's how I would define the difference for me personally.
I have been through, I'm only, I say only 64. And I've experienced a lot of stuff. I've been a few places on the planet. I was fortunate enough back in 2002 and 2004 to travel with my second wife and present wife to Ireland for 2 weeks each time, which is where we would love to move to. Thank you very much. If anybody has a way for us to do that, hey, get in touch with me. I would really like to make that happen. It's a dream of mine. I love the people. I remember talking with a gentleman that one of our programmers had a guest on who was from Northern Ireland, and I told him of my stories a little bit, and he says, "Well, I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways." He says, "What is it that you love about Ireland?" And I said, "It's the people." He says, "That's the answer that I get from everybody. It's the people." And of course, the cooler weather, everything's green all the time. It's just wonderful. And I hope it stays that way for years to come. But I've had, like everyone else, highs and lows. And the biggest thing for me that I was challenged with for over the last 15 years or so has been dealing with the concept of duality. I finally made peace with it. I finally made peace with it by realizing that in the macro and the microcosmic worlds, there is no judgment. I mean, we look through the telescopes and we see all the stuff happening. We see the Perseid and other meteor showers. We'll see this happening and that happening, asteroids colliding here and there. We have an asteroid that's headed towards Earth called Apophis. It's supposed to skip by us the first time in a couple, 3 years or 4 years or so. Not worried, because there's nothing I can do about it anyway. But there's no judgment. Oh, we don't sit there going, "Oh, how bad. Oh, how God, that's cool. How good." We might ooh and awe in awe. We're awestruck. That is to me not the judgment of good versus bad. But then on this level where you and I live, oh my God, there is judgment to spread around and have extra. And I realized there is no good or bad. There are life experiences. There are learned lessons. That's what there are. And I think that maybe a lot of people feel a little, I don't know if the right word is hamstrung, because they don't want to do, quote unquote, the wrong thing. Would you say that trusting one's intuition is extremely vitally important in making sure that if your goal, if your purpose, shall we say, is such, you're going to be guided not to do the right thing or the wrong thing, to do something?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's such a great question, Richard, because it popped up for me earlier when you were talking about do something, that whole concept. And we know we are our bodies, all of us are energy. Everything is energy. The science tells us that. And with energy, it needs to be circulating, right? And
Right.
so you can't have stagnant energy or things die. And so, so kind of the fear that immobilizes us is really unhealthy for us. And so doing something really does unblock that energy, whether it's the right thing or wrong thing. Doing the right thing, yes, intuition is so important. And as the Eastern traditions tell us, lead with your heart and your mind will follow. And even the studies on the right decisions have recognized and reported that the first impulse is always the right decision, but that our brains will talk us out of it, 9 times out of 10. And so let your heart lead you. What's the emotional impulse you get? Yes, there's nothing wrong with duality. Just accept it. It's only a problem when it's attached to judgment. And as you said, judgment is the destructive force. And what we know is that we judge ourselves first, and then it gets projected out. And so very, very important to be loving ourselves, forgiving ourselves, not judging ourselves. And if we can do that, and we can accept, the old phrase, he is who he is, or she is who she is, or it is who it is, which is about acceptance, then we can stop our own quote unquote suffering by that constant judgment of ourselves and then others.
Now, we're our own worst critic. Someone challenged me one day when I was talking about this, and they said, "Well, wait a minute. What about all the mistakes you've made in your life?" And I said, "I've never made a mistake in my life.
That's
Never.
right.
I
But you
have
learned
had
a lot.
I have had a learning experience, but I've learned a lot. You're right. Absolutely
Yes.
correct. Absolutely correct." I want to thank
Yes.
you so much for joining us here on the program to share your insights about International Peace Day, and of course the website Pathways to Peace. Tezikiah Gabriel, Executive Director for Pathways to Peace. I can't thank you enough, and we will talk following the program about something I have in mind, and I'll just kind of run it by you before we throw it into gear. But again, thank you so much for being a part of what we're trying to do here, and that is when I was a kid growing up, they would ask, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" or "What do you want to do?" And they said, "Then don't pick change the world because it's way too big." And so I picked something small. I'm 64, and I've said this now for the last 15, 20 years. I want to change the world.
That's
Okay,
right.
so thank you for helping us to change the world.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a fascinating conversation, and I'm delighted to have been here.
I do have 3 final questions that I ask all of my guests, and I'll ask those of you in just a moment. But first, I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And then Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., following the news, streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We also are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. We hope that you will subscribe and click notification so that when I post a new conversation, you will be notified. We also ask that if you'd like to be a part of the work that we are doing, we ask that if you can support us financially, we have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. We have an email address that we want you to put into the field when they ask for it, and it's richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And we also ask that you take time, and this ties into what we talked about at the end of this program. We also ask that you spend some time during this, the decade of perfect vision, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. With all that being said, we now move to our final 3 questions for a very special guest. And the first of those 3 questions is, who is Tezikiah Gabriel?
Hmm. I am a person, like all of us, a human being who is delighted to be on a spiritual journey. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and I am someone who experiences joy through service.
What gets you up in the morning?
I wake up excited with the mantra, help me to remember to bring love into every interaction. And then I wait for the day to unfold with anticipation.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, perhaps today, because every day feels like a best day. There are some days that aren't best days, but most of my days are best days as I have the opportunity to interact with a whole lot of people who I find immensely fascinating, that I have the opportunity to bring love into those interactions, that I have the opportunity to share concepts, ideas, beliefs, and I have the opportunity to change the world. So I'm going to say today is the best day.
Well, we thank you again for sharing with us here on Tell Me Your Story. And we thank you for watching and listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Again, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, a hope, a hope.